Welcome back to We Rise Together, breaking barriers in STEM, the space where we celebrate women who are pushing boundaries and leading with purpose in science, technology, engineering, and math. I'm your host, Rawan, and today we're exploring something that doesn't always get enough attention in STEM circles: personal branding. More specifically, a framework that can change the way you grow your career, whether you're in a lab, you're training, or you're just starting out your career. It's called the PI effect, and it stands for performance, image, and exposure. To help us unpack it, we are thrilled to be joined by Jahnavi Brenner, an MIT trained chemical engineer turned leadership coach. She's the founding CEO of the Vivid Leader, and she brings 25 years of corporate experience in R&D, sales, and human resources. Welcome to the podcast, Jahnavi. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Rowan. It is really wonderful to be here in your community. As a former engineer, it's great to be back among technical peers and especially women, and to be able to support them on something I think is so important in their careers.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you as well. And your career path is such a great example of always having the option to reinvent yourself and grow. So I want to start there. Could you please walk us through your journey? How did you pivot from chemical engineering to coaching leaders and founding the Vivid Leader?
Well, it's been a long journey. Let's be honest about that. I was a chemical engineer at MIT, and I went to Cincinnati and worked with Procter & Gamble in research and development for about 6 years. And I was able to work in the US and Asia. And it's when I was working in Japan that I started thinking about the cultural differences of an American company hiring Japanese employees. At P&G, the best Japanese employee wasn't likely what a Japanese company would want, because the culture of how we operated in Japan was so different than Japanese culture. That got me really interested in how people work together in companies to create the products we make and, get them on the shelf for our consumers. I ended up making a location move that I ended up moving to Colorado, mostly because of location desires to be near my family after my work in Japan ended. And so I worked in sales, and then I moved into sales operations, sales training, and then eventually HR, which, human resources are the people in companies that actually help employees get lined up and kind of organized in a way and moving in the same direction, despite what, functional silos they might want to operate in. In 2012, I had a child and decided to leave P&G and move back to Colorado with my husband and small daughter to be close to family. I worked in a lot of smaller companies that were establishing human resources. I had roles like HR business partner, head of talent development, and also head of HR. Near 2019, I went through a 9-month training program to become a certified coach. And in early 2020, I decided to launch my own business, The Vivid Leader. And we're focused on leadership and executive coaching, talent development, and culture consulting.
That's amazing. What I can get from your story is that truly, like, career growth doesn't always have to be linear, and I can tell that as a coach, it seems like you've always had the thing where you like to connect with people. I think in engineering, we work in teams. You went to sales, you're connecting with people. You have to be able to read people very well. And then in HR, you're also training people. You have to, have this sort of like emotional intelligence to work with, people from across industries, right? So this brings me to my next point. When you're working with leaders from different industries, I want to know more about the Vivid Leader. What kind of transformation do you help your clients create?
Yeah. So when we're doing one-on-one coaching, whether executive or leadership coaching, we tend to coach one of three types of leaders. So one is someone who's new to level, they just got promoted, and they might be struggling a little bit. Sometimes when we get promoted, we think, I'll just pedal faster and it'll work. It'll all come true. And I'll just, run faster or pedal faster
Yeah.
and work harder, and I'll be successful at this next level. And that's
Yeah.
not what's required. And so we can help that leader understand through stakeholder feedback, what are their peers looking for them? What is leadership looking for them to do, and how they want them to show up at work? And then create the action plan for them to grow and learn how to do that and to begin to deliver on that. Another type of leader that we support is someone who is brilliant technically, but it's really hard to work with them. They might
Mm.
be, sometimes in HR, we fondly call the brilliant jerk. A company totally
Oh,
needs this person, and they have so much wonderful technical expertise, but they're just hard to work with. And I'm sure we've all worked with those people. And I got to admit, that was probably me back in my early days. Um, and we can help that person understand that their impact is very different than their intent, and help
mm,
them understand how can they have the impact they want to have in the organization, and how they need to bring people along with them. And that's actually one of the most fulfilling experiences as a coach, is to be able to help people become more effective at work and impactful at work, because they have such great ideas, and the company is going to be amazingly successful if
mm,
they could only bring people along with them. And then the last type of leader we tend to coach is someone who is aspiring to the next level, and the company wants to invest in them now before they have a job opening or an
mm.
opportunity for them to step into. We usually help those leaders become more strategic thinkers, better at decision making, better enterprise level leaders versus a functional or technical leader. We also do programming where we put in some programming that I'm really particularly proud of is our mentorship and career sponsorship programs, where we match junior talent in organizations with senior talent, either at the executive or VP level, to
Mm.
support that junior talent in their career development. These programs take total strangers on a 9-month journey to get to know each other better, work together to create a career action plan for that junior employee, and then take specific directed custom action to support that junior talent. We completely design those experiences, guiding them through one-on-one group conversations and activities to accomplish this. And we've done this in a few different companies. Um, and the results are pretty amazing. The junior talent comes out of these programs with clarity and progress on their careers that hadn't been possible before. And what I love is that they also come out with this renewed commitment to the organization, which in HR
Mm.
we always talk about as employee retention.
Mm.
The senior talent comes out with this sense of pride and accomplishment and helping individuals in the organization achieve their career goals. And they also have a better understanding of what that day-to-day life is for a junior employee that they may have become out of touch with. And that helps them become more inclusive leaders.
During the IEEE We Leadership Conference a couple of months ago, we attended your presentation that talks about a framework that you use with your clients, which is the PI framework. For folks that haven't heard about this framework before, can you please break it down for us and maybe tell us what PI stands for and why is it such a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely. PI is something that we share with our sponsees and mentees in our mentorship and career sponsorship programs. And this framework was introduced to me at Procter & Gamble and comes from a book called Empowering Yourself: The Organizational Game Revealed. The book was written by Harvey Coleman back in the 1990s. Harvey is a Black man that spent many years in the 80s at IBM, which you can imagine was mostly white men in suits and white shirts and ties. He worked really, really hard at IBM and advanced to a certain level. And, at one point in his career, by performance standards, he was in the top 3, but he got passed over for a promotion. Not only did he get passed by, not only was he passed over, not only did the 2 people in front of him in performance results get promoted, but he was passed over by the person who was number 4. And he was shocked. He'd worked hard and he realized it wasn't paying off. So he spent some time to understand the game of corporate America and wrote down the rules of the 90s in this book. So PIE is a concept based on one of these unwritten rules, and it stands for performance, image, and exposure, PIE. And Harvey tells us that focusing on performance alone is not enough to get promoted. I've adapted PIE as the formula for career success, not just promotion. And I like to share it with anyone that might not be familiar with these unwritten rules. And that includes people from underrepresented groups, first generation corporate employees, and more. Often people like us, and I'm myself included, focus on the performance only, and we fall into this achievement trap. If we work hard enough, we check all the right boxes, we think that success will follow. But the narrow focus on performance doesn't work. We need to manage our image and our exposure, the I and the E. Image is the message that we send before we speak. Do people really see us as ready for that next role or ready for that additional responsibility? And exposure is who knows that about you. Is it the decision makers that can unlock and open the doors to what you want? Whether it's working on a specific project, an assignment abroad, or a promotion. We have to be able to manage all 3.
That really puts things into perspective. It's truly, like, I think we've seen this in our day-to-day life, and we're always told, like, just let your work speak for itself, or like you just have to, work on this skill and that skill, and like in your work, technical skills. We are not always given enough attention to how we're perceived, right? So it's not just about being good at what you do, but making sure that the right people know about it as well, right?
Yeah.
So what happens when we overlook some of those elements? So if, for example, I neglect either my image or my exposure, like my efforts into projecting my image and exposure, how would that hold people back?
Yeah, I think you raise a great point, Rowan, about the type of feedback we get and where we put our attention. And so, Harvey tells us that the formula is 10% performance, 30% image, and 60% exposure, which is pretty shocking, right? Like if we're spending
Yeah,
10% of our energy in performance, maybe we've got 10% left to spend on image and exposure. This is the
truly.
relative importance of these factors in achieving our career objectives. If we don't manage our exposure, if we don't pay attention, if we don't pay attention to who knows about our achievements and who knows about how we get work done, we're essentially the best kept secret. Our boss and the team right around us think we're amazing and great, but nobody else, and likely the people that unlock the door and open that door to what you want in your career, they don't know who you are. They don't know what you can do, and they don't know what you want. If we're overexposed, and so maybe a lot of people know us, but we don't have a good image, if we're overexposed, where we have exposure, but without a good image, many people know about us, but they don't think well of us. These people are not going to say yes to our requests because we're not showing up in a favorable way to demonstrate what we're capable of.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You're right. Yeah. So why you mentioned that the PI framework is especially important for women and other underrepresented groups in STEM. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a couple things, and you alluded to it earlier. It's really difficult for managers to give feedback on image and exposure.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
so easy to give someone feedback on a technical thing, especially if they're technical themselves. This is
Yeah.
extremely objective feedback, so it's easy for me to give it to you. Where image is something that's more subjective. But honestly, that's the real feedback and the honest feedback that we need from our managers to help us advance, to help us, move forward in our career aspirations. My father gave me that advice about, doing the hard work. He said to me back in 1995, I clearly remember it. I just started working at Procter and Gamble, and my dad had never worked in, a true corporate America environment. But
Mm.
he said to me, Jahnavi, put your head down and work hard and you'll get what you deserve. And he meant well. He absolutely did. But his advice does not serve women or people of color in STEM well at all because we're not actively managing our image and exposure. And sometimes women and people of color are worried about being braggy, but
Yeah.
we have to think about it in in a different way. We have to reframe it. We have to make it easy for the decision makers to make decisions in our favor. If my boss or my boss's boss doesn't have a simple way to refer to my top 3 accomplishments over the last year, or why this project I worked on or effort I was involved in succeeded because of what I did specifically, it becomes really difficult for them to defend why I should be chosen for that project or maybe advocate for me to be considered for an opportunity or something on a new team. If we think about it as making it easier for the other person, it might be a little more tolerable for us when it serves us, but it actually serves the other person as well. As I mentioned, I made a lot of career changes over those 30 years, and it wouldn't have been possible without help from other people. So I like to support other people making career pivots or those that are in job search. And when I talk to them, I always say, if my network could be of value to you, please let me know. I will make any introduction you want to anyone in my network. And when the job seeker asks me for an introduction to someone at company X, I always ask them to give me 3 short sentences about who they are and why they want to talk to that person at company X. I ask them to make it easy for me, and therefore I'm more likely to do it. The other thing I see is that people have career aspirations, but they honestly don't know how the decisions get made to fulfill those aspirations. I spoke with someone from the IEEE community a few weeks ago who met me at your conference. And she said she wanted to get promoted. And she works in a pretty big company with established promotion processes. I assume has established promotion processes. And I asked her directly, do you know how that decision for you to get promoted gets made in your organization? Do you know who's involved? Is there a written document that has to be created? When do these conversations happen? And being aware of this information about the process can help you create a proper exposure plan so that the right people know about your achievements and your desires. Otherwise, you might be focused on conversations with the wrong people, or you're leaving it up to your manager to create all of that and do all that work for you on your behalf. And if you're the manager, who do you want to work with? And who do you want to promote? It's probably the person who makes it easy for you. In our mentorship and career sponsorship programs, we find that mentees and sponsees are finally learning the information about the promotion process from the senior people they get matched with in our programs. But we can ask that information of our managers. We just have to have the courage to do it.
Wow. This really hits home, and the way that you phrase it, that we're also helping our managers and our bosses to notice us, or like to know why we deserve this promotion or we deserve this raise, and so on and so forth, really puts things into perspective, right? And it's such an important reminder that being visible is not just self promotion, it's self advocacy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really nice to look at it from this perspective. It makes it sink better, right? And I know, like, like, for us women and underrepresented groups, we always feel like, oh, like, I want my work to speak for me, or I want to get the recognition from people without having to brag, as you said, right? So putting it in this phrasing makes it make sense, to be honest. You know, as career-oriented people, we think that this is practical, right?
Right, right. But I think about it as a great product, right? Like, let's say there's a new shampoo out there that, I don't know, works miraculously. I used to work at Procter and Gamble, so I think about consumer
Yeah.
products all day long. There's a new shampoo that works perfectly for Indian women, who I happen to be, and somehow it's specially formulated for Indian women hair. If I don't know about it, I can't buy it. And
Yeah.
so the people who make that shampoo needs to share the benefits of that shampoo with me somehow,
Yeah.
whether it's
Mhm.
through TV advertising, print advertising. They have to market that product so I know about it and I can experience that life change that it's going to bring me. So that's what this is about. We can't expect people to read our minds about our career aspirations and do all that legwork of quickly summarizing our achievements. I think that's putting a burden of work on other people when we should own that. And if we don't take control of that messaging, other people will. And will they say things that we want them to say, or will they say what comes easy to them? Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Coming back to the ILC conference, many of our listeners are IEEE members. As IEEE members, we often attend conferences, present our research, or even sit on panels, right? Could you please share with our listeners how to leverage the power of the PI framework in those kind of professional settings?
Yeah. So these are opportunities outside your company or university,
Hmm.
the rest of the IEEE community. Well, first of all, I think those are amazing opportunities. Volunteer for them, especially if the idea of being on stage or presenting your research makes you feel uncomfortable. The more times you do it, the less uncomfortable you'll feel. And we know that growth comes at the edge of our comfort zone. If we aren't
Yeah.
willing to be on that edge, we're not really growing. So I think, consider it a service opportunity. The research or technical work that you're doing is important and interesting. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. Your company wouldn't be funding it. Your research, wouldn't be funded at your university. So you're serving conference attendees by sharing it with them in an easy to digest, accessible way. And you don't have to do it alone. Ask for help and take help from others who've been there before, who've presented in panels, who've, presented their research and given a workshop breakout, etc. Once you have that opportunity, whether you were given it or you feel you earned it, own it. This is an exposure opportunity. Do not squander it. Think deeply about what you want to be known for and make sure you come across that way. Some things that you could demonstrate in these settings that could work really well for your career is, the first one is the ability to communicate complex ideas clearly and confidently, to translate technical topics into accessible insights. You could explain the real world impact of your work, not just the methodology. Strong performance for engineers is not just having deep technical expertise. It's about being able to share that with others so they can learn and build on it. You have to bridge that gap between technical excellence and practical understanding that allows for the reapplication of your work in other areas. Another thing you can do is make connections to things outside your area of expertise by having broad industry perspective. You can go deep, but you can also lift your head up and look around and make connections between what you're working on and what else is going on around you and how that connects to what you're working on. You can share how this is applicable to other situations and contexts and what excites you about that. And then finally, when you're at a conference, get off your laptop or your cell phone and meet and connect with people. You're there to be in community, so be in community, not in some fake isolation with a device. Go first, walk up to someone, introduce yourself, state your name clearly with a brief description of the problems you solve or what your interests are. Maybe share where you're coming in from. And then ask a question. What brought you to the conference? What's been the most interesting thing you heard today? What are you taking back with you to apply to your work? This naturally leads to a conversation, and the other person's going to ask you that question back so you can have a dialogue. This is a wonderful place to build new professional relationships, colleagues that you can call on for advice when you're dealing with a challenge you might not want to share with other people in your company or in your organization. Maybe it's someone that you might leverage later to help you make a career change, or perhaps you can help this person in the future. Networking like this can seem uncomfortable again because it seems like it's about you, but it's not. When you realize that everyone is feeling uncomfortable with networking and you take it upon yourself to help others feel comfortable, that might help you take that first step.
Yeah. And like I think we've all been in that situation where we're in a networking opportunity, whether that in a conference or otherwise, and we're like just like scrolling on our phones, even if there's like nothing on our phone that we're actually like reading or like checking, right? It's just like to
Right.
avoid the awkward situation of walking up to the next person or the person that's sitting next to me on a dining table, for example, and saying, hi, my name is that, and I'm working on this, right?
Right.
So yeah, so we often think that branding is huge and intimidating, but it really can start with how we introduce ourselves to the person next to us. And you never know, sometimes this next person might be the person to connect you to your next career, right? You
Absolutely.
never
You
know.
would not believe I met someone in line at the waiting to board a plane, and she
Oh.
has introduced me to an opportunity that might change my career trajectory. That happened in a matter of seconds. I just jumped into their conversation and, we went through the airport after the plane landed. She handed me her card and said we should get together, et cetera. Right. So you never know where these connections are going to come from. And it's important to be making them because you never know when you can serve someone else too.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we really need to leverage those conferences. I also remember like one time I was going to a conference and there was this professor that I really, really wanted to talk to and connect with. I wanted to do an internship with him. And you know where I connected with him? We were going to the airport at the same time. So we were like waiting for the train. I found him there, like, oh, he's all alone, right? In the conference, professors are often like guarded with so many people that want to talk to them. It was just a chance for me to talk to him, on a train station. So that was really fun.
That's
Uh,
awesome. And kudos to you for taking advantage of that, right? And just seizing the opportunity. And he was probably standing there going, oh my gosh, I'm all alone. I'm going to look at my phone. And you
yeah.
saved him from that. You saved him. That's awesome.
Yeah. Speaking of branding, so us engineers, we always say like, oh, that's not for me, Um, we sometimes people think that if I'm showing, like if I'm overdoing my exposure and bragging about my image, this might correlate with me not having a good performance, or I'd rather have my work speak for itself, right? So how do we approach personal branding authentically, especially through the pie lens, without having to self-inflate?
Hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right that engineers often resist branding because it
Yeah.
feels inauthentic or self-serving. But here's a reframe for you to consider. Your personal brand is simply the consistent value you bring to your field, right? It is not something you're telling people about, it's what you do, right? So when we think about performance based branding, your brand isn't what you say about yourself, it's what you consistently deliver. For engineers, this might be maybe you're known for solving specific types of problems exceptionally well. Maybe you're the person who always finds the elegant solution or the one who can debug an impossible issue. Your brand emerges from your work patterns, not a marketing strategy. And so reflecting on what you do well and owning what you do well is not bragging. It's simply making it easy for other people to know that, right? Like I don't have the luxury of observing you at work over 10 years. But yet over those 10 years while you were at work, you probably showed up in a consistent way because of the way your brain is wired or because of what is interesting to you
Mm,
or because of something you learned before. And if you simply tell me that, that's really powerful. And now I know that instead of having to have spent 10 years with you to observe that. And maybe I wasn't paying attention, so I didn't really observe it, right? You're just
mm,
giving me a shortcut by sharing that with me.
yeah.
Authentic branding, is about aligning your image with your actual strengths and value. If you're naturally detail oriented, lean into that and be known for a thorough analysis. If you're a systems thinker, become the person who always sees the bigger picture. The goal isn't to create a persona, it's actually to amplify what you already genuinely do professionally. And then in terms of exposure, this is where engineers get stuck. They think that exposure is about self-promotion, but it's actually about sharing knowledge, which is what scientists do so well. Around the globe, scientists have to share their knowledge with others to help us advance the field. When you write technical blogs or speak at a conference or maybe be on a standards committee, mentor junior engineers, you're not promoting yourself. You're actually contributing to the field. Your brand just builds naturally through these contributions. I think it's so important to just start small and be authentic, right? So, the way you introduce yourself, in your example with the professor or, at a conference, you're sitting next to someone, instead of title and company, maybe try, I'm Jahnavi. I specialize in making complex systems more reliable. Or you might say, when you're making a comment in a meeting, well, based on my experience with similar architectures or similar, whatever the technical situation is, these small consistency patterns build your professional reputation organically. So the brand that you're projecting should really feel like the most concentrated version of who you already are professionally, not a character that you're playing.
Many of our listeners are early career engineers or students. What are some of the strategies that they can start doing today to build their pie?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the first might be, to document and share your learning process. Starting a technical blog or sharing some posts on LinkedIn or maybe even some public documentation where you explain problems you've solved or concepts you've learned. They might be
Mm,
problems other people already solved or concepts other people already learned, but that's okay. Don't wait until you're an expert to write about your journey from confusion to clarity. It serves kind of dual purposes, right? It reinforces your own learning while
mm,
establishing you as someone who can communicate technical concepts clearly. You could write about a tool you discovered, and that contributes to your professional visibility as well. Another tip is becoming the person who asks great questions. And this is awesome
mm,
because you don't have to know the answer. You just have to ask good questions. So, when you're in meetings or classes or technical discussions, you could ask thoughtful, clarifying questions like, well, what would happen if we tried to scale this? Or how does this connect to industry best practices? Because that demonstrates critical thinking and engagement. It builds your reputation as someone who thinks deeply about problems, but also wants to connect concepts across different areas, which is a crucial part of professional image. And I have one more that might be relevant, which is to volunteer for the technical tasks that others might avoid. So
mm.
look for documentation projects or cross-team technical presentations that other senior engineers might want to delegate. They might
Yeah.
not be glamorous and they might seem intimidating, but these types of activities can be visibility gold mines. You'll learn systems deeply, you'll interact with others, and become known as someone who tackles necessary but challenging work. And you might discover some technical insights that others might miss. The beauty of these approaches is that they're all about providing value first, and then your reputation builds as a byproduct of genuinely helpful work, not active self promotion.
This is so great. What I love about those tips is that anyone can start doing them regardless of their experience. This is something that I can do as an early career researcher. I can do it if I want to start pivoting my career, right? And it's also some of the stuff that I can do even as an expert as well, right? The part where we're sharing what we've learned, we're sharing information, and so on.
Mhm.
In Vivid Leader, I know that you're also coaching emotional intelligence, which is a key part of leadership. But how does the emotional intelligence connect with the PI framework?
Yeah. Emotional intelligence is a really key part of leadership. There's four components. The first is awareness of our own emotions, and then regulation and expression, appropriate expression of those emotions. And then third is awareness of others' emotions and then responding to those, right? So there's kind of four
Mm.
components there. EQ, which is what people call emotional intelligence, is actually the foundation that makes PI effective.
Oh,
Without it, you're just going through the motions. So, here's how they're connected. Performance can be enhanced by EQ. Your technical skills might get you in the room, but your emotional intelligence determines how effectively you perform once you're there. EQ helps you read the room during presentations,
mm.
adapt your communication style to different audiences, and manage your stress when things don't go as planned. An engineer with high EQ doesn't just deliver great technical solutions. They do it in a way that builds trust and collaboration with their team and in a way that helps their company shine or organization shine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's really, really important. And emotional awareness, being able to handle difficult conversations, give constructive feedback, those are skills that are seen as future leaders. They're the most important skills in future leaders because they demonstrate the ability to handle both the technical challenges and the human dynamics in the workplace.
Mm. Yeah, that's valuable connection. Really, like the way that we feel in the room can sometimes shape how we show up in it, right? If
Mhm.
you can read the room, you can respond in a better way, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
So, can you share a real life example of someone applying the PI framework and seeing a shift in their career?
Rowan, I can share my own personal example, which might be
Oh,
a little difficult here, but I'm going to keep it real. When I was an engineer when I was an engineer at Procter and Gamble, I surprised my manager one year by walking into her office and asking to be promoted. I thought I had done the work. I was managing bigger projects, more projects, and I even had more direct reports than she did. And it had made sense in my head that I wanted to be given and deserved to be given that title of senior engineer. However, when I shared that with her, she was completely shocked. She had no idea that was an aspiration of mine, and she didn't see how others would support my promotion.
oh,
Yeah, it took me a while to get over the gut punch of her response, right? But I was able to understand that she wasn't the only one involved in my promotion decision, right? And I knew that talent reviews and promotion conversations happened below me. I just didn't internalize that they happened above me too. And so we needed to socialize the idea of me as a senior engineer to other decision makers. And she shared with me that I had some image fixing to do. I was proud of the way I'd carried myself at work. I was a bit of a change agent, a maverick, I liked to think. but others saw me as a boat rocker or worse, a complainer.
Oh,
Yeah. And nobody wants a complainer on their team, and nobody wants a complainer as a leader, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So she told me I really needed to bring solutions forward with the same enthusiasm that I had for pointing out the problems on how we did things. I needed to demonstrate a more positive attitude and be able to brush off challenges, or at least appear that I could brush them off and continue to work towards the goal instead of being maybe a Debbie Downer, always moaning about what was wrong in our organization. To be clear, my manager wasn't asking me to pretend that problems didn't exist. She wanted me to outwardly be more positive about being able to overcome them. This was really helpful guidance for me, and I became more conscious of the language and the tone I used, especially with people that were senior to me, but also to those that were on my team. I was able to
Mhm.
make that image shift. And actually, now I'm known to be someone who's quite positive despite headwinds. And people want to be around me in difficult situations. I also work to build relationships with her peers and her boss, just enough that they could know me and respect my contributions to the organization. Honestly, I probably could have spent more time on that exposure piece, but it worked. And I was promoted the following year and then chosen for an assignment in Asia. And of course, I use these lessons, right? Especially being mindful of exposure as I made career changes at Procter and Gamble, relocated to Denver and was working in a new market in human resources and needed to find a job. And then as I launched and continued to grow my business.
Wow. I love that. It really shows that strategic shifts can truly lead to big results. Yeah. And it's really important to not neglect those pieces of the pie puzzle, right?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think, asking for feedback on this is probably the thing that we can do that serves us the most. It's so
Yeah.
difficult, as we mentioned earlier, it's so difficult for managers to give this type of feedback. But if we actively ask for it, and that's um,
Mm.
what's in the action planning worksheet, if we actively ask for this feedback, our managers can help us and we can partner with them to create an action plan to address any gaps that we need to address.
Before we wrap up, I want to speak directly to the listener who's feeling energized but a little bit intimidated or unsure how to begin. So, what's one piece of advice you'd leave them with?
Well, I encourage them to connect with me on LinkedIn, Jahnavi Brenner, mention this podcast, and ask me to send you my PI action planning worksheet. It's a 2-page worksheet that you could use to outline your career objectives, consider your performance, image, and exposure, and create an action plan to address gaps that might exist. I share this with participants that attend my presentations on PI, and it can help you figure out really quickly where to focus your energy and what actions to take. And I'd be happy to share it with this community as well.
Do you want to walk us through how to use it, or is that part of the conversation that we're having one to one with you?
Well, in the worksheet, so, you'll just send me a quick request on LinkedIn and say, hey, I heard your podcast. I want to get your worksheet. So we don't have to actually talk. But in
Mhm.
the worksheet, the beginning of it is about what are your career aspirations, right? And so it asks first, like, what are your career goals, short term, long term? And then steps through the different components, performance, image, and exposure, and asks you about your strengths and the gaps in each of those 3 areas and what actions you could take to enhance any of those, right? So there's different prompts in the worksheet
Mhm.
that can help you get there pretty fast.
Yeah.
And people have found this to be really helpful to take, their experience listening to a presentation and put some action around it that can really help them.
Amazing. So that's an actionable item that any of our listeners can do. Just go to Jahnavi Brenner on LinkedIn and tell her that you listened to our podcast episode and ask for the strategic planning worksheet?
Ask for the pie model action planning worksheet.
Great. And if our listeners want to know more about this framework or the work that you do, where can they find more information?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn, Jahnavi Brenner. They can find me at our website, which is vividleader.com. And they could send me a note at jahnavi@vividleader.com. So happy to connect with folks to bring this presentation or this content to their organization, or to chat one-on-one if there's something I can do to support them, whether it's coaching or some other opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jahnavi, and sharing your wisdom, your story, and this incredibly empowering framework. And to everyone listening, remember, you're not just building skills, you're building visibility, trust, and a leadership brand. If you found value in this episode, be sure to leave us a review, share it with a fellow STEM colleague, and don't forget to subscribe. Share your thoughts on hashtag the pie effect, but don't be misguided by any bakery posts. Until next Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking up, and above all, keep breaking those barriers.